Hello. Gonna make sure that this music is loud enough. There you go. Hey, Rockstar, Prodigy, Dojo. Hey, Cyan. Hello, 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 hello. Oh, maybe this will be too loud. Yeah. Okay. How have I been? I have been good. Very busy. Very busy, but I've been good. Yeah. I had to take last week off because work needed to happen more. And I hadn't finished for the week, so I had to take last week off. This week a little bit more manageable. Could stop at like a good time, but I still got a lot of stuff to do this weekend. But we're gonna chill and draw some stuff and have a fun time. So hey, Mary. Vegan take. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Absolute. Yeah, I find uniforms to be really fun to draw because it's so like no, like casual, very mundane clothing. And even though I've like never worn a uniform, I find the really like simple setups, right? Like it's just like the sweater and the long skirt is like it's very satisfying to draw. So I like drawing the ones that people tend to find are like kind of uh they're not like the idealized uh uniform, but I really like drawing the more basic, mundane ones. Always. Always from imagination. I saw the announcement for it. I see that people are enjoying it, which is good. drawing from imagination a lot more now. Feels less intimidating the more I do it. Super excited to get to a point where I can truly break free and be more adept at expressing the stuff in my mind. Yeah, I really like drawing from imagination because it's a very once you get used to it and it's less, you know, you trying to keep track of a bunch of stuff, right? Like, oh, I gotta think about proportion. I gotta think about, you know, my anatomy. I gotta think about the balance, the composition. Like, once you kind of get used to that kind of stuff, and you're able to kind of make those decisions kind of subconsciously, I find drawing from imagination really meditative because there's like a point where you can kind of just start having these like conversations in your head about more abstract things, like what is the implication of, you know, this line versus this line, and like, does it tell like a greater story or does it make it look better, or even just kind of like the feeling of being able to just like draw with almost very little happening in your mind is also very nice. Because there's something just very relaxing about like just drawing, you know, not worrying too much about anything else. I really think it is the most fun way to draw, because you kind of don't know what to expect, and that's kind of the point. There's no plan, there's no like real way to be certain about what it's gonna look like, so you're kind of at the mercy of whatever happens, and the process of letting go of control in that way is really nice. I do enjoy it quite a bit. Like, it never gets old. I do this stuff at work. I do this every single day. And it's still just as fun. Yeah, I'm surprised. I remember seeing the Hi-Fi Rush, I guess, like, Shadow Drop announcement. And I remember thinking, like, that's cool. But I wasn't, I guess, overly impressed with... I thought, like, execution-wise, stylistically, not very unique, but execution-wise was, like, very well done. The animation was very good. I think in moments where it mattered, the expressiveness of it was really good. So I thought it was a pretty successful product. And you know, it's a cool type of game, but I'm surprised how much traction it's gotten. It seems like a lot of people really like playing it, so at least I'm glad it's fun. You'll get back to it. There's always like a sort of peak and valley when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like, when you first really start getting a grasp of fundamentals and you really start using them to a much stronger degree and far more often, and you have a better just like overall understanding of it, your art tightens up a lot. Like, you start feeling a lot more constraints because now you've learned a bunch of new rules surrounding this thing that used to just kind of be like this wild west of a, like, I don't know if this is right, but it's gotta work because I don't know any better, right? And you enter that stage for a while, and it's tumultuous. And I'll say, like, once you get even better than that, once you get past the point of, you know, relying on the rules, I find that generally, the constraints begin to loosen up. You begin to care less and less about sticking to the things that you know to be true, and think more about all the ways that breaking them, or all the different ways that you can break them and still make it feel real and structural and solid. The true mastery of anything, I think, is when you learn how to break the rules in a way that it doesn't exist in spite of them, it exists because of them, right? Like, you're not purposefully breaking them to, you know, for no reason, without any kind of, like, existing knowledge. It's one thing for a total beginner to kind of just, like, break the rules and not understand it. It looks very different when someone who does know the kind of workings and fundamentals behind it and have a really solid foundation, when they strike out, it feels much more purposeful, a lot more intentional. And I think that's, like, the real big point of, like, learning your fundamentals and being really comfortable with them. Because at a certain point, you just learn which ones you let go, which ones you kind of get away from in order to get closer to that, like, idealized look and feel. So I'd say you'll probably be in this state for a while as you know, become more used to it and become more accustomed to, like, all this new information. But at a certain point, it'll kind of go back to being this, you know, open, more free space where you're a little less concerned about, like, keeping things anatomically correct and having all of your proportions be consistent or accurate. And a lot more concerned about, like, what does it mean when your proportions are stretched in a certain way? Does it add to or take away from the final result? And your problems and your ideas are going to consist less of, you know, worrying about your fundamentals and far more about the content that you're creating. So I'd say don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Honestly, like, art gives me a lot to be hopeful about. Like, being in art, drawing, and all that kind of stuff, like, there's always something super nice about this whole, like, process, because I know there's no end to it. It's just, like, this constant push for more or different. And, like, the idea that I am preoccupied with certain problems right now with my work, but, like, the idea of knowing that in the future I'm gonna have a different set of problems, because the reasons why I love art and the reasons why I love drawing, I will have changed by then, and that, like, there's just gonna be this whole new future and whole new way of thinking about it that's never ending. It's this constantly giving thing. I think that's really why, like, I love being in this craft, is because, like, I really don't know how many other things continue to give over the course of your entire life. Like, there's something fundamental to how you interact with art and how you grow through it that, I don't know, the prospect of, like, some of these problems that I'm currently having, or even thoughts that I'm currently having about my work, the fact that, like, give or take a few years and I'll be past that and on to, like, a new thing. I don't know, it's a nice thought, because I love the idea that even if I feel like I've spent so much time thinking and ruminating in this space, like, there's gonna be new thoughts to have, new ideas to think about, and new, you know, abstract things to tackle with. I always think about the quote. It's always attributed to Hokusai, but, like, I don't know if that's actually who said it, but the idea that like I think in a way you can read it very in a very cynical way. He said, if only I had, I think, another lifetime, or I don't know if he said a lifetime or a few more years. Something about the fact like if only I had a few more years, or if only I had another lifetime, I could become like a truly great artist or something like that. This idea that like it never ends, it never is within reach. I think you can see that as in both a negative way, but I think I like to think about it in a very positive sense of like this amorphous feeling that I have of never being like enough or fully knowing everything or fully knowing enough. It doesn't end, so I can choose to either be upset about the fact that I don't ever feel super comfortable, or I don't ever feel like I'm fully grounded or fully in the know. I can choose to be upset about that, or I can choose to enjoy the fact that there's always going to be something new for me to think about, something new for me to like work on, and that me sitting down and ruminating about it while I draw and having like, you know, quiet moments where I'm just like enjoying the process of drawing, like none of that's wasted, because it's always that opportunity to like think about a new problem, a new query, I guess, because oftentimes they're not really problems, they're just things, right? It's just states of being. It's nice. It's a very relaxing thing, I think. Hey Jimbo, thank you for the 30 months. Yeah, I brought that up because I think about that quote a lot. It has kind of always stuck with me, I think, because there was a time in my life where I really despised like the old masters. I really despised these like great artists of an older time, because I always thought they were like awfully dramatic. You know, they were always like, oh, in search of this great mystery, or they're like, I'll never be good enough in this lifetime, or whatever. And you know, obviously we consider them like great masters and stuff. So I was like, oh, they're so dramatic, so like over the top. But like as I started thinking about it, there's something very true to the idea that like you know, this never ending sort of feeling of like, am I gonna be able to understand all of this stuff and get good at this thing before the end of my lifetime? And like this reoccurring thought across all of these like fantastic artists across time, having been like, no, there's not enough time. I feel like at the end of my life I'm still gonna be missing things, or I didn't have the time to like have certain thoughts and consider certain aspects of this abstract like problem. I think the fact that that was such a common thing that they all said was like in a way very reassuring, because then it's like, well, then I don't have to be in a rush to like find out, you know? I don't have to feel rushed to like figure all this out, because I'm not going to. So I might as well like enjoy this moment in which I can take my time to really dissect like the more abstract things I've started to really grapple with now that I've gotten past the point of needing to worry about like overt fundamentals, and I can just kind of think about things I actually am interested in, like, you know, stories, or all the different quirks of a human can demonstrate to you through their posing, or this kind of like very abstract conversation that you can have in a drawing. I think I'm able to take a lot more time to just kind of do this, have that conversation, knowing that there won't be an end to this exchange is it's a nice thought. You know, any tips on foreshortening? My fingers almost always feel flat and stiff. If your figures feel flat and stiff, it's probably because you're not giving them enough volume. So a lot of people have this problem. I have this problem, especially if you only do 2D art. Like you don't do any kind of sculpture or 3D stuff. We don't really have to think about volume and mass in the same way, right? We don't really have to think about that kind of stuff because we can just kind of fake it. But the importance about knowing and really being aware of volume and mass, the importance of it is because, like, we have to describe those same attributes of an object with the placement of 2D lines, right? We have to describe 3D attributes with 2D lines on a 2D surface. So, like, what does it mean? It means that slight modifications to the angle, the width, the you know, distance between other things, like any small difference to that line work is going to drastically communicate something else. And so we have to be very purposeful about the lines that we use to describe things, because otherwise, as you describe, when you try to foreshorten something, for example, put something in perspective in 3D, in this mock 3D space on a 2D, like a 2D paper, suddenly every line that is placed just a little too close to something else, everything that's not given the proper volume, not given the right amount of, like, depth, is going to suddenly collapse in on itself and feel extremely flat. So how do you remedy that? If it's possible, I recommend absolutely taking, like, some time to think about, like, taking a sculpture class or a 3D modeling class. It's not mandatory. I think it's very helpful for 2D artists to, like, experience that at least once. Because it forces you to realize, like, how much you take for granted as an artist, specifically like a 2D artist, and makes you think about, like, all the things that are left unsaid when you draw, because you're supposed to your brain's supposed to, like, infer it. But if you can't take a class, it's fine. Easy way, or not easy way, but a good way to kind of start this conversation is to use very simple forms, right? So, like, using these, like, very basic shapes, basic forms, are going to help you very simply look at, you know, like, the basic forms of reality, the basic shapes that create things. The more you can break the body down into these basic shapes, the easier it'll be for you to see, like, oh, thickness and like diameter, like the mass and the volume of things really do matter, and how they stack up with each other and their relationship between each other really does matter. It's knowing that the rib cage is both much rounder and also much wider than people give it credit. It's recognizing that the mass of like your leg, your thigh, for example, is not just a cylinder, it's actually a tapered, almost like weirdly triangular, like this almost like partially prism-like cylinder tapered thing, because of the muscles on it will change the kind of volume and mass of it as well. Random things like the lower leg slightly bends, bows a little bit, right? And so when you're drawing it in a foreshortened way, you can't just draw like a straight cylinder and for that to be it. You have to recognize that it kind of curves a little bit and comes back to the ankle. From the knee to the ankle, it has like a slight bend. And then the leg, or not the leg, the ankle itself is almost angled as well, so that you have like a slightly different perspective for the feet. Like, all of these things, it's a very, very complex relationship, right? But like, I think it's very important that you understand how to break the body down into simple forms, and then from there begin to layer on more and more complex ideas, right? Like, I think people take for granted how important it is to recognize the volume of a cylinder, the volume of like a cube. They know how to draw them oftentimes, but they don't really know how to put them to use. And it's only when you realize like how difficult it is to really fully foreshorten simple objects that they realize why foreshortening a human body is such a big thing. It's such a big, complicated thing. That's why any line that is misplaced will suddenly just undo all of the work you put into it. So something that you can do, which I've done in the past. Let me see if I can pull it up. Where is my... I have a board called Bodies in Perspective. For this reason. Let me find it. Bodies in Perspective. Let's make sure it's showing. Yeah. So this board's fun because, you know, it's got a bunch of like dramatic perspectives for things. But let's see, what's a good thing for this? So this one might be nice. A pretty fun exercise is to take like a photo of someone in some kind of perspective, and kind of trying to, let me make this bigger actually, draw like the contour lines around their body. Oops. It's a very fun thing to do because it kind of helps you fully like work through like, okay, this is where the pectorals are, so this actually comes out to be a much more defined like plane change versus like down here where the abdominal muscles are not as pronounced, and so you might have small bumps, but then it'll curve back and you'll get to actually see like where the very clearly defined like kind of sides of the human body are. It's a nice exercise to kind of just like train yourself to do this. Because then you kind of recognize like, oh, actually there's quite a bit of space for the rib cage. There's actually quite a bit of space between like this perceived front and back of it, and it'll help give context for why like certain things that you draw turn out to be much flatter than you might want. It's because you're not considering the actual full volume that you're implying with the lines that you're making. So breaking down the body into simple shapes, right? Understanding how to break all of this down into simple, easy to understand forms. And then taking that information, applying it to your figures, and then kind of building on top of that, right? Adding the muscle, starting to learn like where the nuances of anatomy kind of start to take you away from the simple forms and give it a little bit more like organic shapes and stuff. Once you spend more time even just thinking about it in this way, it gets a lot easier to see what parts of your drawing are getting flattened out for whatever reason. and makes it a lot easier to then understand like what you need to study or maybe even need to like review, just to make it feel a lot more three-dimensional. So hopefully that made sense. What is that hairstyle? I don't know. I think it's like a half ponytail, half up, half down, something. Is there an exercise to learn or two to learn to draw without guidelines? Drawing with a pen will put the fear of God in you. And is a pretty good way to kind of introduce yourself to it. And just kind of drawing without guidelines and realizing how many mistakes you make and how and why you need sketches, and resolving to, instead of using sketches, to just keep drawing without guidelines until you figure it out. Are the two things that I did. Uh, 25 never drew, but I keep seeing on TikTok digital art and I want to get into it. Any tips? I mean, I don't particularly know what you mean by tips. Like, there's probably tutorials on, I mean, I don't know if you have the materials. Digital art is very dependent on you having access to some kind of technology, whether that is a computer or like a tablet or an iPad or a phone, right? I wouldn't really recommend a phone as your thing, but you can use it if you want. And if you have access to those, I think it's really like about learning to use the program that you want to use, or trying out a few programs, and then once you have like a good sense for the kind of place you want to make it, then it becomes just a question of like, okay, now you have to learn to draw, which is like a whole different thing that is not about tips, right? Like, I can't give you tips on doing the whole thing. But I do recommend, if you want to get into drawing, like, the best thing you can do for yourself when you start to draw is to focus more on what you want to draw than focusing too much on what you should learn before you get to the things that you want to draw. Try and experiment with actually drawing the stuff that got you into drawing, right? Like, if it was just pretty face painting things, I don't know, I think I've only seen like the TikToks where they like paint like hyper sparkly portraits, where they draw really like paint really sparkly portraits of like Instagram models. I've only seen those TikToks. I don't know if that's like all of TikTok, but if that's what you want to do, then I'm pretty sure they post like process videos, right? Like, you can try to follow along, but I'd say if you're just starting to draw, like, focus on actually drawing the stuff you want to get into before you get too deep into trying to, like, quote-unquote study and learn. As soon as you get a good sense of like, yeah, I actually really want to do this and I want to get better at this, then you can take the time to actually dive into it and um, figure out like what are some things that maybe you should try to start looking into, things that you should maybe research, advice that you should seek out. It's a long process, but I'd say if you want to do it, go for it. And it really is just like, go for it. It's not until you start that you're going to know exactly what you need to learn. How is the D&D game going that you're DMing? It was pretty good. We ran the session 0 for everyone, and it went well. I'm already like, because I've been so busy, I'm already running into the whole thing of like, oh, do I have enough time to prep for the next one? So we'll see. Going to college for animation and illustration in the fall. Any tips? My tips for like if you're going to college is it's really easy for classes for you to like kind of think of your classes as not being super important or homework as just being something that you do to get done. But I really truly recommend like every time you get homework to really think about like why is it being assigned. Sometimes you get teachers that kind of just give you work and it's really terrible and not super useful or interesting. But sometimes, like, you might be surprised how much thought did go into the assignment. And, like, it really just takes, like, a little bit of you meeting them halfway for you to understand, like, why an assignment is very useful, why it is teaching, what it's trying to teach you and how it's trying to teach you it. And also, like, all the different ways you can take advantage of the assignments that you do. I think a lot of people, they go through school kind of just waiting to do something fun or interesting. They're just kind of waiting to do the thing that they actually want to do. I recommend really pushing your teachers and pushing like the kind of classes you're in to kind of let you do the things you want to do. Ask your teachers if you can kind of mix it with a project that you've been wanting to do. Ask your teachers if you can make all of the classes that you're taking that semester relate to each other, right? Like, I asked a couple of my teachers if I could work on the same project for all my assignments. So I was basically putting together a portfolio and I wanted them to let me do the same story, the same project, just retrofit it so that it like, or not retrofit it, but like fit the assignment so that I'd still be doing the assignment, but I'd be doing it with this story project thing in mind, right? And a lot of them were into it because yeah, like why not? I'm still doing the work, I'm still doing the homework, but I'm just changing the theme of it so it all kind of correlates. If that's something you're interested in, if that's something you want to do, if you find yourself getting really like caught up in how boring your assignments are, like I really recommend putting in the effort to ask your teachers to let you do certain things, right? Because generally I find that a lot of like the memes about going to school, right, is like you're often just waiting to be done with a certain project or whatever, just to move on, turn it in, and enjoy like whatever free time you have or whatever little free time you have. But I really think that my time in college was made much better because I actively tried to find the usefulness in all of my assignments. And even the ones that were not super useful, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I learned that this wasn't like a super interesting one, and I could devote less time to that and focus more time on stuff that did interest me, or I made interesting, right? And there's a potential for every class and every assignment to do that. Not every assignment's going to be like that, but I think more often than not, people overlook the opportunities within school to make it the education that they want, and are just hoping that it will end up being that. It usually won't. So if you're going to school in this coming fall, biggest recommendation is to just look for opportunities to cater your education to your needs, whether or not that's just catering it to your interests, right? Like if you always want to make a webcomic, and you get like a story assignment, like ask your teacher if you can make this assignment about your story that you wanted to write. You know, all these things makes school a lot easier, makes your assignments a lot more fun, and you end up learning a lot more, I think, overall, because you actually put in the work to figure out, like, okay, what is it trying to teach me? What am I trying to get out of this? What does my teacher want me to get out of this? And, you know, you might potentially end up with a project that does pay dividends in the future. Like, both of the two portfolio projects that I did back in college, I still use in my portfolio because those have gotten me pretty much most of my jobs. I specifically asked my teachers, hey, can I make this project about this thing? And they were totally fine with it. And that is where my like little pink skater girl character came from. I have not had like the time in my past few years of my life to actually sit down and do another portfolio project. So those projects from college has carried over until now, even though my work is way better now. So really try to find like the good and the interesting in all of your assignments. I promise you there are definitely going to be moments like that. And when you take advantage of them, they pay dividends. I promise. Jiseki, thank you for the raid. Thank you so much. How am I doing? I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. Yeah, this week was pretty wild, but I'm feeling really good about it, and I'm feeling good in general, I think. I was feeling really like lethargic and tired earlier this week, like kind of sick, but I'm feeling pretty good now. When you draw, do you try to visualize lines, anatomy before you draw, or do you have general lines, then problem solve your way out? Both. Sometimes I like just kind of problem solving my way out of things, and sometimes I have like a basic idea of what I want to do. You have a good visual memory. I was listening to a Magic the Gathering artist talk about Kim Jong-gi. Wait, yeah, and Peter Han, and said it's not like these guys are drawing for nothing, even though they're not looking at what they're drawing, they just remember what it looks like. Yeah, I mean, this is what I say about people like Kim Jong-gi, right? And I guess Peter Han. I don't really know his work very well. It's not magic. They're not doing anything crazy or magical. And that's why it's impressive, because it's not coming from nowhere. These people have truly and fundamentally understood these things that they're attempting to draw. And once you've actually started or attempted to draw something that you haven't actually like sat down and learned to do, like you realize how amazing what they're doing really is, because you understand like even though you've seen things in your life, like you know what people look like, you know what buildings look like, but just because you've lived in this world and you've seen these things does not mean you know how to draw them, right? It does not give you like any kind of help in that regard. So, in a really substantial way, to be able to draw something from imagination, and especially the breadth of what he could draw from imagination, Kim Jung-gi specifically, it speaks volumes to all of the things that he's had to draw throughout his life, and all his deep familiarity with all of these different types of objects, right? From vehicles to perspective to humans to like to spatial awareness, just to depth, to composition. Like, that's why it's amazing what he does, is because it's not magic. It's not some divine godly thing that people like to joke about. It is just a man who has so thoroughly studied and understood the things that he's attempting to draw, that even in the midst of creating a completely wild composition that has absolutely no rhyme or reason, he can do all these things because he's intimately aware of how they interact with each other, how they interact with space and perspective and the camera and the viewer and each other, so that even though he's not using sketches, even though he's not planning these out, he kind of already knows, like, you know, even if he puts down a stray line, it's not stray to him. It's not a mistake to him. It's something that he can work with, right? I don't think people like him ever, like, it's not like they never make mistakes. It's the fact that they know how to wrap their mistakes back into the drawing. They're not bothered by it, because that's not the point. It's not, the point is not to be perfect. It's not to be this printer, basically. It's this idea that, like, it's not the end of the world when things don't go to plan, because that's the whole point. There is no plan. But the fact that there is no plan doesn't mean you're left stranded. It's, you have all these tools and these experiences, these bits and pieces of knowledge about these things that you're drawing. And a lot of people consider that to be like your visual library, right? They consider that to be the thing that you have in your head that you can pull out in a moment's notice. But arguably, I'd say it's a lot more than just visual library. It's a true fundamental understanding of these things that he's drawing. That's why he drew a lot of the same stuff. Like, he drew, I think, tanks a lot. And, like, he would draw food stalls and, like, very specific types of architecture. He drew in the fisheye lens because that was, like, a really interesting way for him to complicate things, right? Like, these are both an aspect of them having really good visual libraries, I suppose visual memories, but also, like, the idea that, like, they also just had really good problem-solving skills. They were really good at going with the flow of kind of imagining various ways that a composition could work out and kind of allowing that to sort of drive them forward. And that's a level of mastery that comes with years and years of understanding and practice and problem solving, and inherently realizing that, like, it's not about knowing how to draw these things or knowing what you're going to draw ahead of time. What really matters is, like, you are prepared at a moment's notice to use the tools that you've gained over the course of your life, to bring that back into the fold, and use them to solve problems that have not yet been posed, or questions that have not yet been asked, right? Like, how do you make all of these lines come together into a composition? Kim Jung-gi never planned any of his compositions, I don't think. Maybe he had an idea that he wanted to do a top-down fisheye lens thing, but, like, he's not deciding what each character looks like ahead of time, sketching it out. And I think that's what made people like him very special, because it's just the sheer amount of things that he could do that with is substantial. Most people know how to draw very similarly to Kim Jung-gi. Like, people that can draw a face without any sketches fundamentally are doing the same thing that he did, but realizing that they are doing a fraction of what he was able to do, and for him to do that so young as well. I think that's, like, the real magic behind what they did, or I guess what Pirhan is currently doing. It's partially good visual memory, but it's also just, like, an amazing ability to like respond to an abstract idea, to respond to kind of the chaos of not knowing what's next, but being confident that you could make the next thing happen. And be able to do that with so many different types of things. Vehicles, people, architecture, all that kind of stuff. I don't think I have the cognitive abilities of like that's like any more vivid than anyone else. I think I just have been drawing the same things for a very long time. It's also like a very I don't know, like I'm not doing anything that requires like anything special beyond just like I focused on very specific skills in order to get to a certain spot. Cognitively, I don't think I'm very bright. like I don't think about things in very extreme details. The reason why I draw the way I do is predominantly because I don't think about things in very specific detail. I kind of go with the flow, and that's like a relieving thing for me. This thing of like not having to plan ahead and not having to think about things ahead of time allows me to invent in the moment, and that is both a terrifying prospect and also a very fascinating prospect. So what I'm doing does not require any kind of extraordinary level of like, you know, mental perception or even like visual perception. It is just a culmination of very specific skills. A taste for improvisation, a taste for like this interest, I guess, in just seeing what happens, in not wanting to necessarily be in the mindset of correcting mistakes, but be in the mindset of like taking everything that I put down and problem solving in the moment to make it matter, to make it make sense, even if it doesn't. And that's all this really is, really. It's just trying to make sense of lines that I put down that I didn't necessarily think through, and then sometimes I get an idea and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I will have a plan. But I don't need a plan. I don't necessarily want to be planning. And when I don't, it's cool. And when I do, it's nice. Do I plan on doing something close to the one-on-one class in the future? We'll see. Welcome back. Any concept artist rec? What kind of concept art? What genre? What industry? Environment? Oh, it's gonna make me authenticate, isn't it? Give me a second. For some reason, ArtStation needs me to authenticate every single time I log on with my normal browser. Yes, it's me. Please let me in. Thank you. Environment artists. I don't follow very many. But I'm sure I can find some. There are a few that are kind of cool. There's this guy. His stuff's pretty cool. Let's see. This person doesn't post that much, but her paintings are really fun. I don't know if she technically counts as a concept artist. I think she's kind of like a background matte painter kind of a person, but cool stuff nonetheless. Anton Fadiev is always a good one. Really like all of his stuff. Let's see. There's others. This guy, I don't know if he does environment concepts. He kind of does a lot of things. I think he's mostly like an art director type, art lead type. This guy's kind of an illustrator, but his environments are nice. You see a trend where it's like, I don't know if they do environments, but their environments are nice. Yeah, this guy worked on Spider-Verse. His stuff is pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really keep an eye on environment artists because I don't really do environments myself, but some cool ones out there. Ugh, I'm like 2 minutes into drawing a gun and I already don't care. This is why I can never be a prop designer. I don't give them the time that they deserve. Back to lovingly drawing folds. Wonder if you had any brush pack recommendations for a more painterly style. I gravitate more towards 3D look, but I've been wanting to try something new as of lately. Painterly? I like... There's some that are cool. I only really have track of the ones I bought on ArtStation. But this guy's brushes are pretty nice. I think I remember them being. This guy's brushes are pretty nice for like that super oil painted look. I don't remember if I actually ever used this guy's stuff. Let me look. Yeah, stuff is fun. They're not really brushes. They're honestly kind of more like texture things. I use normally like very flat brushes to paint, and then I add texture with this brush set. It's kind of like how it's been, but I haven't painted in a very long time, so it's like my brushes that I use, my go-to, I haven't really like tested them in a while, so I can't say if I have a good sense for it anymore. But I remember being really happy using those for like a very oil painted look. I thought they were very successful. Otherwise, like I use like a hard round that is squished to like that shape. Hard round brush that has flow turned on, so not opacity but flow. When the transfer settings set flow to pen pressure and then turn opacity off, or you can turn opacity on as well. I found flow to be a much better way to paint than opacity in terms of transfer settings. Also turning flow down in the settings on top in Photoshop has also been really nice. But I also haven't painted, so can't say if that's still true for me. But yeah. Do I keep any sort of bullet journal planning techniques to manage my week to week? Not really. I've tried a lot of them because I love the idea of being organized, and then I always end up not using them at all after like a day. Um, Generally, I know, like, I'm not as busy as I was during school. Honestly, like, I'm constantly working, but like school was actually like super stressful. And so a lot of my management techniques of like going from week to week was usually during school when I had a bunch of stuff due like every day. In which case I would always just be like, okay, like here's the total list of things I have to do. Right? Like I'm like, oh, I need to finish this and this and this. Um, and then if I have like a week thing, I would just say like, okay, if I can get this, like if I just do this, I'll be happy if I just do half of this and the rest of it like the next day. And then like, okay, this needs to be done by the end of that day, so maybe I'll try to like split the time there or whatever. Like it's very basic time management techniques, and I only do that when I'm like super stressed. If I'm not, and my day is generally like uh open and I don't have like as strict deadlines, I'll usually just like try to keep track of what's due when, and just sort of operate very ad hoc. um I'll just kind of say like, okay, it'd be nice if I got this stuff done. I absolutely must get at least one of these things done. And then kind of just go day by day. Luckily, since I work full time, in a salaried position, my assignments are very like standard. I get like a schedule of things that needs to get done at a certain time, and I just like work with that. So nowadays I don't really need any like management tools, because I don't really take on outside projects anymore. So my time is very much evenly split at work. But I never found a lot of management tools to be very helpful, and I'm very bad at journaling. Uh, the last book I read was Howl's Moving Castle. I actually read the book, and I gotta say the book is pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed it. But that was like the last book I read, and I read that like months ago. See, I love watching people journal. I hate maintaining a journal. Like, I know what my thoughts are. I don't want to write them down. Like, I get very aware of, like, I'm writing things down to write things down. This is not actually helping me do anything. I am perfectly fine just, like, getting deep into my thoughts. Writing things down is literally it's almost as if I'm performing for myself because I'm like, I should write things down. It'll help me organize my thoughts. It's like, no. I've been doing this whole I've been managing this you know, whirlpool of of mistakes for over 20 years. Like, I didn't need to write things down when I was younger. I don't think I can whoa. What's that? Is that a plane? I don't think I can physically write things down now and have it do anything for me. Which makes me sad because, like, I want to be part of the aesthetic of journaling every day. But I kind of just, like, if I need to write, I'll write, like, a single note on a random page, on a random notebook, and I'll throw it somewhere, and it's like, alright, done. But I typically don't need to write anything. I just... Honestly, drawing is my form of journaling, because I can usually remember what I'm thinking about when I draw something. I'll remember, like, oh, I was, like thinking about this story when I was drawing this jacket or whatever. So I think that's partially wise, because I do a lot of my thinking when I'm drawing, that by the time I get to a point of, like, oh, maybe I should write it down, I don't need to. Huh. Maybe I'll try to find someone. I'm very, self-conscious about my face. So, I don't know if I, like, have the, energy to, like, look at myself in a camera. It's actually very mortifying to see myself on camera. I'm totally fine, like, talking, like, voiceovers and stuff, or, like, I'm super comfortable with that. Like, I don't mind talking in front of people. I don't mind, like, interviews or, like, presentations or whatever. But, like, seeing myself on a camera, like, specifically my face on camera, mortifying. It's paralyzing to me. I can't watch the videos I did for Proko or the Draftsman podcast because I'm like, my face is in that. Like, I can't look at that. But if I'm just talking, like, that's fine. So, there have been times where I, like, thought about, doing video content that had my face in it, and then that was a very short-lived thought, because very shortly after that I was like, that is crazy. I would not do that. Thank you, guys. I really truly do find breaking down tasks into, like, very easy steps of, like, even stuff that feels, like, super simple, right? I always like starting a list with things I've already done so that I feel like I've already started checking things off. But breaking things down into, like, okay, I need to set up my space so that I, like, back when I was in school, if I had, like, when I was at SCAD, I had a lot of assignments that required me to, like, set up a whole, like, charcoal station so I could do the homework. So I'd be like, okay, step one, get all my charcoal stuff out, set up, get the light, you know, do all that kind of stuff. And then it's like lay in the block in the sketch. And lay in the values was a different task. Then do a first pass, like, throughout the whole thing. Just do your first, like, night of, like, fully working on it. The second day was like, you know, establish focal points and dark and dark, light and lights, and like breaking it into pieces helped me then plan out, like, okay, I think this will take me about like 20 minutes, or this might take me an hour or whatever, and then I can plan around my time and be like, okay, I have class in the morning, but then afterwards I can work on A, B, and C, and then like on Tuesday I can do the rest of A and the rest of B, so it can be due that day, and then like when I get back you can do C, and the next day do C and D, you know, like it's very nice to just physically write it out. I've always found that, like, once I've gotten it out of my head, specifically with tasks, once I've gotten it out of my head, that kind of stuff, really useful to write down. Because it's like facts, you know? It's like putting things all out on the table, you can visually see it. Like all that kind of stuff, very useful to kind of get out of your mind. And once you do that, I find things get a lot more approachable. I've coached some of my old college friends through a lot of breakdowns just by saying, like, okay, let's write it down. Let's figure out, like, where all this stuff goes. And they usually, like, don't need my help after that, because they're like, oh, no, wait, yeah. Like, if I do this today and then do that tomorrow, like, everything's good. I'll have time. I'll just gotta, like, stick with it. So, manages stress that way. But honestly, I haven't been in a situation where that's been necessary for me recently. I went to the Savannah campus in Georgia. But I went to SCAD back in 2017. 2017 to 2018. Fall and spring. It's an expensive school. Were there homework assignments that you feel like really helped you? Yes, but it wasn't really the homework assignment itself. It was often like the teacher's kind of reason for assigning the homework that made more sense to me, or helped me more, I think. Because, like, I talked about earlier about trying to make assignments, like, matter, and trying to treat every assignment as, like, you know, a learning opportunity that you could, you know, use to your advantage. Because I've found that, like, teachers responded really well when you cared, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so by making it something I could care about, I would try a lot harder on these assignments, and then they would also respond much better. And I had a lot of really good conversations with teachers who, because I worked really hard, or worked harder, I guess, on an assignment and really made it my own, and I had a lot of fun with it, like, they responded really well and had a lot of really, you know, much more abstract things to say about it, which I felt was much better than just being like, oh, you have fundamental, like, errors here and there. They're a lot more focused on helping me with stuff like, oh, how do you tell whether or not, like, a design is, you know, dynamic enough, or whether or not the choices you're making are suitable for this story or this character, a lot easier to get that kind of conversation going when I really made the assignment like something that I was very passionate about. But not always possible. Honestly, like, I really enjoyed my 3D classes. I know a lot of students at my school were not like, especially the 2D concept people, which I don't understand why, but they hated doing the 3D classes because they thought it wasn't super important. I found those classes to be like one of the most important, I think, courses I ever took, because like, until you understand what other people do in the pipeline, it's very difficult to like fully respect like the consequences of your actions as like a concept artist. So like, I really appreciated the fact that I got to actually somewhat understand what 3D artists do to get something from like start to finish, and it made me very aware of like the design choices I made and like what I did as an artist that made their lives harder. And that has been very valuable because it means that having conversations with 3D artists, which is pretty much like at every turn of my career, has been much easier because I actually know like a little bit of the terminology, and I know the process just a little bit. It's a lot more advanced now, but like I can at least understand what they're talking about. It makes me a much more, I think, aware individual, which makes me a better team player. So a lot of the assignments that had me do things outside of my comfort zone, I was very happy to do. It was a pain, but like, I had to do it for school, so I got to do things I never would have done before, just like drawing vehicles and mechs and creatures and stuff. All quite fun. Haha. What design choices do concept artists do that drive riggers, modelers insane? How do you avoid the model still being artful? Yeah, so, that's sort of the balance, right? Typically, a lot of the sketches that people love to look at are not fit for production. Because what production needs are, designs and drawings that, are not only thought through, they've been solved. The way that you communicate with the modelers and animators and tech artists with your concepts is by clearly delivering like an idea that is not only clean and like visually striking, visually interesting, or visually appropriate, but also has been on a technical level been figured out. So if you give them a design where like, let's see, what are common things that people don't think through? It's hard because my brain's been so like wired to like figure all this shit out that it's hard for me to think of things that like let me see. Do I have any like drawings of things that are irresponsible? let's see. I might draw my DeviantArt. Let me see if I have any characters that are like irresponsibly designed. And then we can, because I'm more comfortable roasting my own stuff than I am other people's stuff. As an example. Let me observe. Let me look through my things. Let's see. I don't know. Where did I put your thing? I don't really remember. Oh, wait, no. Here it is. Okay, so here's the thing. It depends on the genre. It depends on the thing that you're trying to make. And like if it's for a game or if it's for like a film or a movie or whatever. There are certain things where like that level of there's a level of carelessness that will not only function like on a technical level look really weird, but it will also like impact their like ability to showcase certain things. Like in a game that focuses a lot on like clarity of movement, like a fighting game for example, if they have to be moving a lot and really fast, like having a bunch of stuff dangling off of them that like that really impedes the clarity of their posing, impedes the player's ability to functionally play their game, right? To play it at a level that is fair and not like just like visually distracting. MMOs have to create designs that like can all function on the same rig. Save for very specific use cases, most MMOs run on reused assets. And so if something can be remade with just texture swaps, color swaps, like that is a massive money time saver. And using tech like alpha cards makes it a lot easier, so they don't actually have to model these things, right? They can actually just like load in like 2D textures essentially, and not have like everyone's computers try to simultaneously load in tons and tons of geo, when a lot of these things could be solved with height maps or neural maps and stuff. And so as a designer, designing costumes that do not require like an animator or a rigger to change the pre-existing proportions of something, pre-existing like animations, right? So like if armor would clip through like an animation that's consistent, so like if a class has a certain skill that they use, but a piece of armor that you designed would like severely impact like the visual clarity of that skill, your design would have to be shifted in order for that to remain like possible. I thought of something else while I was talking about that. What was it? Shooters, first-person shooters, specifically tac shooters. Every character has to be the same height. And their silhouettes cannot be super dramatic, as to not give other players who play those characters like an edge, right? Like if you are playing against a character that has a very that has like a wider silhouette than other characters, like fundamentally you have an advantage against that character. So all rigs have to be the same, all animations have to be able to run on it, basic animations like shooting, running, crouching, all that kind of stuff. They all have to be the same height. So even if they technically look like they're different heights, the anatomy will be shifted. So like sometimes women's necks are longer in tac shooters, if they are female characters, because they have to be the same height as the men, but need to proportionally look different. Overwatch is not a tactical shooter. It's a hero shooter. And so they are able to functionally do very different things because it is not important that things have to come down to like very specific gut reactions, right? You've got skills and all that kind of stuff. Have you ever ignored that just because this looks so good? The thing is, absolutely yes. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't fly with your manager, your art director, your creative director, right? The important thing to realize when you're working in the industry is like, you are constantly, it is a constant uphill battle. Sometimes it is not nearly as difficult, but it does not matter if you think it looks good. It has to be sold to everyone else. It's constantly this business game of selling the pros and cons of a design to everyone because there's money on the line. There's, tech, there's time, there's like an investment of resources that means that every time you suggest something that breaks a lot of these, that could potentially cause a lot of disruption in other people's work paces, you suggesting that is now a lot of people's problem. That's why as a concept artist, I think it's very important that we are aware of the consequences of our actions, very aware of the consequences of our decisions, because if we don't solve them, someone else has to solve it, right? For example, clipping is not actually the biggest issue for people. Clipping is a matter of fact. Most players don't notice clipping. If they do, it's not something that we would invest so many resources to fix if it's minor. If it's major, that's a different thing, right? People's hair not following physics. That's a totally different thing than sometimes their arm bracer goes into their forearm. Doesn't necessarily break the game, right? People would invest resources into grooming hair for characters, not as many resources as to making sure that none of the armor pieces don't go into other things. But a rig artist would absolutely care if you have belts hanging in front of legs, right? If a character starts running and they have a bunch of shit around their hips, And they constantly have to add bones into the rig to make sure that that doesn't just like go straight into their thighs every single time, right? Like that's bones used in that area and not used elsewhere, like in places like hair or zippers or like tassels or whatever. Every time they have to sacrifice bones from their kind of like economy, they have to be very careful because that's like something that the engine has to constantly be running and calculating. And so if you start irresponsibly adding a bunch of ideas or details in places that don't matter that require extra movement, suddenly it's a bunch of people's problems, right? It's the animators' problems because they either have to set a physics engine on that or they have to hand animate that, which takes a lot of time. Riggers have to add extra bones for things, especially if hair gets really complicated. That's like a whole nother set of problems, right? Modelers, if you give them a design that doesn't work, like these things don't connect, right? Or like your front and back view don't make any sense, right? Like these things, that these inconsistencies, just because they look cool or because you were too lazy to figure it out, that makes their life harder because then they have to come back to us, ask for call outs and extra details, or they have to figure it out, in which case they have to do the legwork that we were supposed to do, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to accidentally inconvenience them. And I can't stress enough how much this is our problem. It is absolutely our problem. Our job is constantly about making sure that we are we're juggling multiple things at the same time, right? It's our job to worry about whether or not a design looks fun and interesting and is exciting and is iconic for the product, is exciting for the players, is like tantalizing in terms of like marketing, and people are willing to buy it or willing to subscribe for it. But it's also our responsibility to consider, like, is this using it, can this be placed on the rig? Are these proportional changes that I made going to completely mess it up and we have to use a different rig? In which case now a bunch of animations have gotten broken and a bunch of VFX things have to be shifted. And some code have to get shifted because like I made these certain design decisions. So like there are, a lot of ways that we can ruin people's day. Or ruin the pacing of a project. And it's with a sense of like, I think, a sense of responsibility that we can be active team players in the production kind of like environment. I mean, like, it's why, like, when people talk about concept artists and the stuff that they do in their free time, like concept artists do some cool stuff in their free time, but they're usually not making things that, like, are production ready. And so, like, I feel like some people get a weird idea of what it means to make production ready art because they think it just looks like the concept art they see on like ArtStation or Instagram or Twitter or something, when typically, like, no, absolutely. I don't know, man. Sometimes, like, animation teachers have, like, a really weird thing where, they... Like, painting traditionally is a good art skill. It's a good skill to have generally as an artist. But there are some times where I think, like, courses are meant to give you kind of like a very classic arts education without considering like the demands and needs of the current industry. Traditional animation doesn't really happen much anymore because of how expensive it is. And I haven't personally heard of many studios that still use traditional techniques in terms of like medium, but especially if you are planning on doing like any kind of like painting or rendering, like if you're a layout artist or background artist, sorry, like those things will definitely come into play. But is it specifically helpful for you as an animator? Probably not. That being said, though, I think it's just a good skill to have as an artist. I don't like doing traditional art because it always felt like a separation of work and life, but haven't had the opportunity to do it recently, so. It's okay though. I like drawing digitally. It's very comfortable for me now. I think if I feel like when I retire, I'll probably get into a big phase of traditional only because of how very few opportunities I've had to use it. So it'll definitely feel like retirement once I do that. I'm feeling fine. I'll probably end at 10 because I've got some stuff I have to do before tomorrow. retirement as in I go off the grid. I honestly think that, like, I think when I retire, it's like full retirement from like any kind of media thing, social media stuff. I mean, you know, I won't even know what social media is going to be like in like the next 5 years, so I can't really say at the time that I retire what it will look like, but I do think about kind of just like closing my life a little bit so that I only focus on the things that are actively in it, you know? So, my family, my friends, and like the work that I do. Be nice if like that could be the thing that I get to focus on more at that point in time. Hopefully, I will be able to live without stuff like that. Yeah, I try to. Yeah, I mainly own art books that are like art of stuff, I think. Well, no, I got a few different ones, I guess. Um, what are some features of Clip Studio Paint that make sketching and painting enjoyable for you? I like two brushes. I like this G2 brush, and I like this 6 pencil soft brush, and that's it. I don't like using any other brushes in Clip Studio Paint, and I don't use it for anything else except for these two brushes and flat coloring. I think flared trousers are very cute. High waist and flared trousers, I think, are very cute. Yes, although I don't do very much rendering nowadays. Remember you were making a comment about belts and fantasy character design and saying how people overuse them often. I can't remember exactly what you said. You said something along the lines of, I wish people incorporated blank as much as they did with belts or something. Forgot what the blank was. Fantasy character design. I mean, they do overuse them a lot. But, like, I say that as someone who also overuses belts a lot. So, like, a part of me doesn't know if I actually did say that. I might have said it to then say it's a character flaw of mine. Because I absolutely use belts all the time. It is like a meme though. Like people put belts in every fantasy design. I mean, when it comes to fantasy, like I kind of wish people just like did different types of fantasy, you know? That's kind of like my main thing with fantasy character design in general is like it's all very samey because we all grew up off of like the same incestuous stuff. Like everything in fantasy is fed back into itself. And like we just keep taking inspiration from the same pool that our inspiration took from. So it's kind of like this weird cycle of just recycling old ideas. That we are so used to it that when we do see fantasy in a different context, we're like, wow, that's so new. It's literally not. It's literally taking a step to the side. And I wish people spent more time thinking about how many different ways fantasy can take a step to the side as opposed to continuing the same trend within itself. So if there's ever a take about fantasy that you wanted to remember, it's that one. Also, I wish fantasy would use textiles more, because I think textiles are cool and patterns are cool. I wish they would use different types of fabrics more, because that's cool. Oh, I know about Witch Hat. Don't need to tell me twice. Is the only manga that I actually own books for. And mainly because my roommate kept buying it for me for my birthday. Very cool of her. Hey, Zico. Nice execution on a simple design. I don't know if I understand what you're asking. Nice execution on a simple design. Is that a question about, like, how to draw it? Or how to design it? I don't know which one you're asking. Even with those follow-up questions, like, I don't even know what the answer would be. Looking back to the retirement answer, if you could retire right now, would you mostly just go offline and make art for yourself or your close circle, or just kind of ignore the internet social media world? If I could retire right now? When I was talking about retiring, I was saying in the context of, like, I'm 50, you know, 50, 60. Right now, like, I'm still in a part of my life where, like, I like knowing the art that's out there and stuff. As well as doing my own stuff. So, like, if I were to retire right now, like, I'd still probably be doing what I do right now. But, like, I imagine by the time I'm, you know, in my 50s or 60s, like, I'm probably not gonna care what people are doing. Like, I'm not gonna care what people are liking or looking at or enjoying elsewhere. Like, if I find it, I like it, cool. I don't want to share that with anyone else. I'm already, like, I realized this recently, or not recently. It's been something I've become more and more aware of. I don't like sharing things with people. Like, I don't like sharing interests with other people. I really enjoy just, like, doing my own thing by myself. It's not that I hate that other people like the same things that I do. It's literally just, like, I prefer to enjoy the things that I enjoy by myself. So, like, if I like a show, or if I like an artist, or if I like anything, I'd rather just enjoy it by myself. So I think that'll only just get more and more prevalent in my life as I get older, that by the time I'm 50, I'm probably just gonna be like, I don't really care what kind of art is out there. I don't really care, like, you know, if any of this stuff, like, is cool to other people. I'm gonna be happy doing my own thing because I like when I am doing it by myself with myself, you know? So, I think that's just gonna be how that goes. But, like, I'm still in the stage of my life where I like seeing what other people are into. I like seeing other people's work and kind of digesting that. But I'm already kind of antisocial, honestly. I'm like an extroverted introvert where like I learned how to be extroverted so that I could survive, but I truly, truly just like doing things by myself. What's an example of a tool that you can use in any creative way that you hope exists when you retire? Um, a pencil? Like if you stripped me down to my parts, I could do with like a pencil and paper and you just give me like music and time. Like I'm a very simple person. I just want to draw. Like I don't really do many other things with my life. I do this for work and I do this at home and I'm perfectly happy doing that, and when I don't want to do it, I like watch YouTube videos or something. Like I'm a very simple person. You give me an opportunity to draw and spend my time doing that, I'm probably gonna do that because like very few other things in my life make me as happy as drawing does. So like I am content. So long as there is a way for me to make lines on paper, like I'm fine. I don't need technology. I don't need any kind of future thing. I am okay. Yes, they truly are such close runner up things in my life. Like they are so close, but not enough. um if the tool for if Clip Studio Paint's fucking paint bucket could like fill in, like it does this thing where like if I try to paint bucket tool this whatever thing, give me a second. If I try to like paint bucket this, it like leaves like the white of the line behind it. If I could get that fixed, my life would be fine. I'm like enlightened at that point. Like at that point, I'm just like, yeah, things are good. Life's good. I don't need anything else. Hey, if Clip Studio could get that shit fixed, then I'm fine. Because there's literally nothing I hate more than coloring. I hate flat coloring with a passion. It takes so much of my time and my life to do because people respond so well to color, and I can't be bothered to color anything. So if at some point there could be some kind of technology that could fix that, hey, life's good. Life's complete at that point. Yeah, it leaves like the place that the line art takes up, it will leave that white and unpainted. Because it's trying to paint in between those spaces. So it's like doing what it's supposed to do. I just wish it would do something a little bit extra. How do you make a drawing more interesting? Probably, well, I don't know. It might be a thing about like maybe it's very simple and there's not a lot of details in it. You want like a good kind of balance of big, medium, and small shapes. So, like, if you take a t-shirt, for example, this is a big shape, right? Literally nothing in it. You can make medium shapes by adding lines to it, right? Like, say maybe I make this like a double layered shirt or whatever. Okay, cool. Now I have big, medium shapes, and now I want to add small shapes. Let's give it a rim here, like an edge. Maybe I'll add some more rips and tears up here. Maybe I'll give it like some stitching here. Maybe I'll add some like plaid patterning. Maybe I'll add a collar here. And maybe I'll add some text. There you go. Alright, so we got big shapes. These are our main objects, right? And then we've got medium shapes. So within the big shapes, it's a little, right? Within the big shapes, we break it up with other details so that each of these things, they're not necessarily equal in volume, right? This is obviously smaller than this. And some shapes are even smaller than that. Right? But there's this kind of like separation of space. And then you add small elements which create another dimension of detail. And this gives you like a good kind of balance of to where like you have areas that are still very open, right? Like you still have these big areas that are simple. We have just enough small areas that keep it interesting so that you're not totally left with looking at just like this shirt, right? And like just adding a few wrinkles can make it more interesting, but I honestly think like keeping with this whole idea of like big, medium, well, that's not an M, and then small shapes is like a really good way to like slowly add more detail to your work in a way that's not like excessive. I think some people are very tempted to just like sit down, zoom in, and then just like keep drawing little details until it is more interesting. But I don't think you really need that much to make something interesting. I think you just need enough to where you're breaking up the big open spaces, and adding just that little bit of personality, just that little bit of more detail to where it's good. You've got all the things you need to make like a solid design, and you don't need any more than this, unless, you know, you want to add more. But this is kind of my go-to is like big, medium, small shapes. If I feel like something's too simple, maybe I don't have enough medium or small shapes. I feel like something's a little too even, might mean that I need to vary up my medium shapes, put in some more small shapes, focus them in certain areas. If I feel like it's too busy, means I have too many small shapes, not enough big and medium shapes, right? So that's typically how I judge like interest, is balancing this like equation of this ratio of big, medium, and small. And generally if I need to make something more interesting, I'll add more medium and small shapes. So there you go. Uh, what makes you happy about drawing? Like, what is it about making marks on paper? Uh, I think there's something very satisfying about just like the act of pushing pencil across paper and having it form a line, and then all those lines coming together to tell something a little bit deeper, right? Like, I don't believe that everything has to have a message. I think my work is relatively literal. Very simple. I'm just drawing characters that I think about, but I think the act of drawing it, of drawing these characters, of thinking about them, of creating like these moments in time, is really satisfying, and I think drawing in itself is a very satisfying act of expression. It's always very nice when things come together, and they don't always, but when they do, it's very enjoyable, and I really like the kind of state of mind it puts me in when I get really deep into drawing something. I think it's very hard for me to wholeheartedly focus on stuff, and I find that drawing puts me in that state more often than not, and I really like it. How do you establish perspective, and how can you be right in it? I mean, how can you be so accurate? I'm honestly eyeballing it most of the time. You can make it more accurate by actually drawing like a grid, but I have no patience for that, so I tend to try and eyeball it. I always try to keep that perspective grid in mind, but as I'm drawing it, I'm trying to imagine like, okay, what is the shape of this leg as it foreshortens and stuff, and does that match the grid I'm trying to establish? Does this all look like they're working in the same space? And it's usually through trial and error that I figure that out. I'm not a very technical person, and I don't really like establishing perspective or anything like that. I have tried the area scaling thing. I found that it sometimes does it too much. Like, just moving it like +1 will sometimes leave way too much outside of the lines. So, mixed results. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. How to use straight and curved lines, especially on human anatomy. I mean, how to make decisions about where to use both in a balanced way. Yeah, this one's tough. Nothing on the human body is perfectly straight or curved, but it's really about using your understanding of anatomy to inform the lines that you make, right? It's about knowing like what's supposed to be there and allowing that to tell you like, okay, should this be more curved? Could you straighten this and not have it look weird, right? Like a very common way that people tend to use straight and like curved lines when drawing the bodies, like having a very simple form of this for like the leg, where you'll have like curves on one end and then straight on the other end and then curved and then straight and then curved and then straight, right? So it's like this opposite kind of game. The idea that like what is it, like, I think like opposite of every curve is a straight. I don't know what it is. There's always like simplify anatomy to make this more I guess like obvious, but I'd say it's much more important to recognize like what kind of nuance or subtlety you should put into a curve to make it say more, right? Like there's a difference between something like this and something like this, right? They're both curves technically, or even something like this. These are all different ways that you could draw like a shoulder, right? Or you can do something like this, like different ways that you could draw that that shoulder, but they say different things. And this kind of like subtle way of what angle this is at, right? Or how many angles you introduce into it. Like all of those decisions will convey quite a bit more than just saying like straight and curved line. It's not really about where do you put the straight line, where do you put the curved line. It's about understanding how you use both of them to say, you know, what the muscles are, what the pose is like trying to communicate, what the you know, muscles look like, what the you know, shape of the hands or the feet or the legs or whatever, like what kind of pose they're making. It's not so much the straight or the curved line, it's both simultaneously at the same time. And I think the easiest way to do this is to kind of slowly work up to making it more complicated. You can start with things like this, right? And then slowly work your way up to, okay, maybe this is slightly flatter up here. It curves a lot more here, and then quickly curves less, and then hits a straight, right? And then you can say like, okay, well now I want to add a lot more, you know, complexity to this. And now it's like, okay, now it's flat up here. It's much smaller angle here. It's straight, and then it comes back down over here, right? Like it becomes a lot more detailed, a lot more complex as you kind of become more and more comfortable with the sort of details and the subtleties and the nuances in what curves and what straight lines like do for us as the viewer. What we interpret based on how straight of a line, how curved of a line, how much of an angle you choose to put there tells us a lot about your knowledge of anatomy. And that's usually kind of the balance you're trying to hit. It's how much of both do you use? And beyond using like doing observational studies, beyond you know, trying to use that knowledge of anatomy that you have, it really comes down to practice. It really comes down to noticing that these are like, this is how the body works. It's not just, oh, the knee is curved or the shoulder is curved and this is straight. It's realizing that it's often both of the things at the same time. So hopefully that made sense at some point. I'm 24 now. Does this still say 23 down there in the description? 24 now. Do I ever miss the physical feeling of pencil on paper? Yeah. Yeah, I do miss it. But I also know that, like, I've gotten so comfortable with drawing digitally that I do honestly like it a lot. Um, Accuracy comes from, uh, one, having a relatively good understanding of anatomy, of all the things that I need to be able to draw a character, which is anatomy, proportion, and perspective, right? Or, well, I guess, like, all the things I need to draw a character, which is anatomy, perspective, and whatever skill, or I guess, like, character design, I don't know. I have a basic understanding of those things, and so, accuracy comes from being comfortable with those things. I'm fairly comfortable with drawing humans, so drawing characters and stuff is very much like a comfort zone thing for me. And so when it comes to drawing characters, like, I'm done this for quite a bit of time. I know anatomy well enough that I don't need to measure, I don't need to do sketches. I can guess proportionally how things are gonna look. And I am comfortable enough having drawn clothes and costumes and things like hair, to basically make up for doing all this from imagination, right? This is both, like, the process, this is the result of both, like, learning how to draw these things, understanding the fundamentals of what it takes to draw these things, on top of many years of drawing in this very particular way, which is a lot of different skills that I don't know if I have the current brain power to, like, explain. I don't know, a lot of big questions today, with, like, many vague responses that I can give, because I don't know if I can physically come up with the correct words to describe it. There's a lot of stuff. I've had a lot of time. I've been drawing for over 20 years at this point. A lot of time spent drawing, a lot of time learning how to draw a variety of things, predominantly characters. So after about 20 years of that stuff, more than 20 years of that stuff, I know some stuff. I know some things about drawing characters, and it's a lot easier for me to be accurate about it because I've spent a very long time drawing them. So there you go. A lot of time and effort put into drawing characters. And I'm very comfortable with those. What's the biggest art no-no for you? I don't know. I guess, like, tracing people's stuff and, like, passing it off as your own thing. It's one thing if you trace as practice, it's another thing if you, like, trace someone's stuff and then try to pass it off as your own. I think it's very, pitiful. Do you find it difficult to find the distinction between work and hobby, or is the line pretty clear? I have stuff that I only draw for personal things, and I have stuff that I draw at work, so it's clear enough. But I do art both as work and as a hobby, so I don't know, maybe it's not clear. Do you plan on doing art career forever? Yes, absolutely. There is no other path for me. I will do this till the day I die. Expanding your visual library requires research. Your visual library does not expand by you drawing things. You must do research. You must have actual references that you've practiced with, that you've used, that you've internalized. It's like studying, like, for real, right? It's like studying for a test. It's one thing to cram right before the test and know all these things in time for the test and then forget about them later, versus things that you physically actually remember throughout your life. Like, things that you remember learning about, that you continue to know and remember and understand. That's what it means to put something in your visual library. It's not enough to do it once. It's not enough to study once or twice or 3 times. It's constantly revising. It's constantly studying, restudying, understanding, internalizing, rationalizing. And then you come out of that with a +1 to your visual library. Like, it takes many, many, many years to build up your visual library based off of things that you've spent that whole time constantly relearning, restudying, revising, like, reiterating on. And only once you've done it quite a bit do you actually get, like, I think, a much more comprehensive, solid understanding of that thing, whatever it is, whether or not that's, like, clothing or anatomy. So if you're struggling with your visual library, it might be because you didn't actually add that thing to your visual library yet. And when you're trying to do it on your own, it's not solid enough information for you to be using. And so it just ends up being very difficult. But also, visual library stuff takes a very long time to kind of cement. So keep trying, but also keep adding. Keep studying. Keep confirming facts, because then you can actually use that information one day reliably, knowing that it's been researched, tested, and has been used before. What's my least favorite thing to draw? Anything but characters. When it comes to droopier clothing, how do you figure out where the clothes should scrunch, and how do you add extra lines to make the clothing look saggy? Use references. Use research. Clothing is one of those things that you have to know what it looks like in real life in order to properly understand the logic of it and to then interpret it from imagination. How do you figure out where clothes should scrunch? Clothes operate on, in my mind, how I understand it, points of tension. Depending on where tension is, that's where all other things fall from. So, like, if you're wearing pants, tension is getting pulled this way towards a bending knee, so you have radiating fabric that's getting scrunched because all of this extra fabric has nowhere to go. And then you also have a seam where, you know, you're gonna get wrinkles like that because they're getting pulled at that side. That's where the tension is, and so therefore fabric is getting pulled. With droopier fabrics, it depends on the kind of fabric, but they often have things like these like crests and valleys. And this is the stuff that you absolutely need reference for. But I think the main thing to remember is, like, you're trying to convey, you're trying to convey a displacement of fabric. You're trying to convey, like, all of these layers, falling on top of each other due to gravity, right? This is the point of tension, so everything comes off of here. This is where fabric scrunches up under the armpit because there's no space for all that extra fabric to go. The fabric is pooling on top of each other, which creates all these valleys and stuff like that. But the only way you're really going to understand this is if you actually use reference and you actually research this kind of stuff. Because then you can see examples of what happens when fabric is put under certain circumstances, certain situations. When the knee is bent, when the fabric is super bunched up and super, like, sewn in a certain way, that means, like, the wrinkles and all that kind of stuff is going to change. What type of fabric will affect it? The lighting will change, like, how obvious these things are. The way that the fabric is sewn, the way that the clothes are made will change all this stuff too. So it's very situational and is one of those things that I think you absolutely need to use reference for if you're just learning. Because otherwise it's not logic that's going to make a ton of obvious sense until you've seen it happen in front of you, I guess. What I did for practicing accuracy? What was your previous question? Look. How do I practice for anything? Like, I draw just, like, a lot, and then sometimes it matters, and then sometimes it doesn't. Honestly, like, the main way that the way that I draw currently, the only real exercise I ever remember doing is drawing with a pen. Like, that's the only clear exercise that I remember doing that actually, like, has any relevance in this in situation, because like literally you are faced with every mistake that you make, and you have to make the decision of whether or not you're going to stop and try it in a different drawing, or whether or not you're going to find a way to make it work. I decided to always find a way to make it work. That is something I did for years. Drawing with a pen, it made me a perfectionist, which was not a good thing, but it also made me very careful, and it made me slow down and really think about what I was doing. And so all of these things forced me to not only slow down and think about what I was doing, it forced me to be more accurate the first time around. That was me building on my understanding of anatomy, me building on my understanding of drawing technical things like fabric, like drawing in perspective. Those are fundamental art skills that you can learn and practice on your own. But like, in terms of how do I draw the way that I do right now, which is drawing without sketches, drawing for imagination, it is a lot of brute forcing my way through a drawing, improvising, problem solving as I go, constantly, every single time I drew for the last 10 years or so. Every single time I drew something, I forced myself to do it right the first time, and if it wasn't the way that I wanted it to be, I would slow down and I would figure out what went wrong. What are the things I wasn't paying attention to? Was I not thinking too broadly enough? Was I not keeping an eye on the whole drawing at the same time as I was thinking about the details? Was I putting in too many details and not spending enough time considering how to, like, improvise, but also plan ahead at the same time, right? I was teaching myself to multitask as I was drawing. I was teaching myself to be more careful, to be more deliberate, to be more purposeful. These are not things that I can just say, how do you practice that? I just tried to make every piece that I did, every line that I made, mean something, work towards something. The only real exercise that I did that was relevant to this was drawing with pen. Everything else was me building on past tools, past things that I've learned, realizing that I didn't know enough, that I didn't have the right enough knowledge, going back, reinforcing that knowledge through studies, through observational drawings, then coming back to the work that I was doing and taking my time to slowly and deliberately do it right the first time. And when I say right, I don't even mean like do it accurately. It's just like I put a line down and I figured out whether or not that's where I wanted it to be. Every single time. Yes or no? Is this the right line to make? Is this where I want to put it? If not, why? Why do I not want to put it there? Why am I not confident in this line? Can I make this work? If I can, go for it. Keep going. If I can't, erase it. Try another line. Put a line down. Does it work? Does it do what I need it to do? If it doesn't, erase it. If it does, keep going, right? Like, I kept doing that. And for the last 10 years, that's how I've been drawing, because I wanted, more than anything, to make sure that every single line that I drew meant something, had a meaning, had a reason to be there. Because that made me a much more intentional, much more thoughtful artist, made me a much more thoughtful draftsman. By extension, after spending many, many years thinking that way, drawing this way is secondary. Now my biggest problem is accuracy. It's making sure that now that I've gotten used to this way of thinking, it's making sure that the things that I draw are structurally sound. I'm thinking about the whole and the small bits of the image. I'm thinking about everything, the composition, I'm thinking about the pose, I'm thinking about the angles, the movement, the rhythm of the drawing, I'm thinking about the line weight, the line work, I'm thinking about the design, I'm thinking about the composition, I'm thinking about the silhouette, all of those things at the same time as I'm drawing this. That is the escalated version of this type of drawing that I do. I've gotten to a point where I can put lines down and I can subconsciously make the decision. Is that where I want to put the line? Yes or no? Can I make it work? Yes or no? I've gone from that being the main thing I think about to now thinking about all of these other things, building on the same foundations that started me on this path. Drawing with a pen, having to be very purposeful about the stuff I put down. The reason why it's very hard to say, what did I do to practice that, is because you're asking me to summarize the last, decade of my life, which I don't know if I can do. I don't know if I can do that. But that is essentially all that's happening here, is I'm building slowly up various different things that I'm thinking about at the same time. I'm slowly building up each layer of this layer of complexity of deciding that this is the next stage for what I have to keep in mind as I am attempting to get it right the first time. And that's just a personal thing. I don't think you have to get it right the first time, to anyone else. I just prefer to do this because I think it is a fun puzzle. It makes drawing much more interesting. I think it's very, very, I don't know. It's a game that I play. But this is coming off the back of many years worth of trying to be very deliberate about the stuff that I put down on paper. And this is just an elevated version of that. Anyways, I had to devote my whole brain to that because I didn't know if I could say that while I was drawing. Multitasking has gotten a lot worse lately. And I blame lack of sleep for that. What would your advice be to study first illustration or concept design, or why? Those are two different things. Illustration, as a concept designer or concept artist, I guess, illustration is something that you will inevitably do, but I think it's very hard to be an illustrator and then also design because you're not asked to design things as an illustrator. So if you want to eventually do concept, I would recommend doing concept and learning illustration as the secondary thing, because very good if you can finish your concepts fully, but it doesn't work the other way around, where if you can design or if you can paint really well, it doesn't mean your designs are any good. And so if your designs fall apart, there's no point. But if you have good designs and you just don't have as good of an illustration skill, they could potentially potentially someone else could handle illustration while you handle concept. But if you ever want to do concept design, I highly recommend picking design first, because that is a very specific skill set that illustrators do not learn or do not have to learn. But that's my opinion, right? Yes, it is 10. How do you retain all that information? How do you retain information in your life? Right? Somehow you manage to fit years and years and years of information in your brain. You forget some stuff and you remember the things that matter to you, right? I care about certain things. I like drawing characters. I think about and I remember the things that are relevant to drawing characters every day. I forget some of the things that I've learned, and that's okay. I'm gonna relearn them at some point. But it's not like I am, I don't remember every single thing I've learned. But that's not the point. The point is not that I remember everything specifically. The point is that I have all of these tools to then problem solve whenever I need to, right? It's not that I specifically remember how to draw, what is it? It's not that I specifically know how to draw a very specific, type of clothing, but I remember the general shape. I know how to draw certain types of fabrics. I know how to draw certain types of folds and wrinkles. So if I have to draw something I've never drawn before, I can use the tools that I've learned in my life to then attempt it, use references if I need to, but it's I'm using tools in my toolbox to approach problems, to solve problems that I have not yet solved in my life. And that makes it a lot easier because I'm not relying on things that I've explicitly done before. I'm using what I do know to solve for things that I don't know. And that doesn't mean I have every tool in the toolbox. I just have the ones that I know that I need to do the things that I want to do. and eventually I will begin to pick up things that pick up things in other things that I don't know how to do just yet, like doing environments or props or vehicles or whatever. I don't know. Hello. Welcome to the stream. Unfortunately, I am about to end it because I'm very tired. And my brain is foggy. But yes, welcome everyone. But yes, lots of big questions today. I think my brain can't handle as many of these big questions as it used to. So I am very yeah, I'm very tired. Yes, I'm very sorry. But we did some sketches today, so I think it was relatively productive, even though I did not multitask very well at the end there. But I will end it here because it is 10 and I need to do some stuff before tomorrow and hopefully not sleep too late. What is next Friday? I hope I won't have to cancel next Friday. I think I will be fine. I think we should be good, but I will let you all know if that needs to happen. But yes, thank you guys for coming by and hanging out and listening to me ramble. I'm pretty sure that I was basically incoherent at that last bit, but regardless, thank you very much for hanging out and coming by and asking questions. That's very kind of you. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to stream next Friday. I'll let you all know if anything changes with that. But love you all very much. Hope you guys have a good weekend, good week coming up. And hopefully if you just got here but couldn't watch the stream, feel free to watch the VOD and come back next week when we stream again. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and I will talk to you all later.